So, Kote, you were an analyst, right?
Yes,
Th-
twice. I loved it
That,
so much.
yeah, I can't tell if you're being sarcastic with that tone. There's so much I don't understand about that world, and I thought I could research it or I could ask you and learn out loud. So
Mm,
th- there's so much I don't know, but here's what I can infer. Like, there must be some sort of data element and some sort of opinion element, because if it was pure data, they wouldn't need you, right? So
right.
yeah. So then I guess I'm interested in that balance, but I'm also interested in, like, once you have an opinion, you're for or against a technology, or you're saying it's performing well or not, but like there is a company with money at stake behind your opinion. And that company is probably going to be pretty disagreeable and challenge you a lot as an analyst.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I
yeah, do
well,
I have the right impression?
yes, and I think you've identified how would I characterize it? You've identified the most interesting and visible part of the analyst world for people who are not in it.
Uh-huh.
because because
Okay.
because there's always lots of commentary about like, oh, unless I was placed well on this chart, I believe that
Right.
they were paid to say this, so I don't believe it unless I win, in which case it's totally unbiased. And so like I think the whole, like, to use the old term, the whole idea of, pay for play or payola, like, um I don't know. Once you're in the analyst world, you're like, boy, I wish that would be awesome, right? Like if only it were that easy, then I would be doing like a quarterly chart of ranking vendors with some slight variation between them, and then I could retire early. But I think as our guest this week will attest to, there's no retiring early if you're an analyst. And why don't you introduce yourself, guest?
Hello, hi, I'm Rachel Stevens. I'm with Red Monk. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course.
What are your thoughts about qualitative versus quantitative, and also whether you're in the war zone like I think you are?
Yeah, so Red Monk is a developer-focused analyst firm. So really spending a lot of time on just that practitioner and people with the hands on the keyboard view of the world. And so there are some senses in which that view of the world does not lend itself well to pay for play because nobody pays for anything in the developer tools world. But I would say for us, the way we think about it is like the data driven research, if we can find it, is great. Otherwise, kind of augmenting it with qualitative conversations, triangulating what we're hearing and reading, and putting just kind of trying to put puzzle pieces together for people. And the business model is,
That's
I guess there's a few ways to describe it, but it's we research so that people are willing to consult with us. And the reason people are willing to consult with us is because we've researched. It just kind of feeds each other. So I'd say my job is kind of equal parts research and consulting.
so who pays you and what do they want in return for their money?
This is fair. Um, so the other pithy way you can try to describe it is you can talk to me for free, but you have to pay to hear me talk. Usually, I want all of the inputs. I want to hear everybody in the industry tell me what are you working on, what are you seeing, how's the landscape. Like I want all of the inputs, and then the consulting part is me kind of doing that synthesis back out for other people. It's just like here's what I'm seeing, here's how it's all coming together, here's areas that we are seeing traction in, things like that.
And can
Yeah,
you
when
give
when
me
when I was trying to be a snarky little shit back when I was an analyst, I would tell
why are you
people,
talking past tense?
"Hey," well, at least in this instance, that the way that I was a snarky little shit then that I'm not so much now is as you say, I would tell people like, "Oh, I get paid to talk," like, like I don't want to talk right now, but yes.
So can you give me a concrete example of something you worked on?
Yeah, so I feel like I've spent a lot of time recently kind of in the open source license world. Not so like one of my colleagues is Steve O'Grady, and like not in the Steve O'Grady way where I'm like crusading for open source in social media. gonna leave that to others. But for me, it's how are we seeing impacts of license changes in the wild, which is really tricky because a lot of the license changes that happen in proprietary, like companies that are not yet public companies and don't have to release their financials. So it's a really small view of the world. Like, what are we seeing? And so it's like one of those things where it's like, can I take a little chunk of data, combine it with some commentary about what we're seeing overall, and then just letting people. And like, I think one of the things about analysts, and I'm sure Cote can attest to this, is like that piece of research in particular was the biggest Rorschach test I've ever published in terms of like either you imprinted your own confirmation bias on it, or you like imprinted your own outrage, and like same data, but like interpreted wildly different ways because all the data is incomplete. And so like you can take it either way you want, but it's interesting.
How do you avoid your own confirmation bias? Do you have a certain mindset or anything that helps you do that?
I think it's being willing to be wrong, I think, is a really important part of the analyst job, or like being willing to learn. Both of those things go hand in hand. But is it something where I have I think it's also just like how you survive in social media in 24. It's like if something is evoking a strong feeling, you should probably check that. Just like so those kind of things are just like what does my gut say? Like, is my gut like kind of am I leaning too much into that, or do I need more data? Things like that. It's an art, not a science.
That sounds enjoyable, honestly. And can I say something? I love being wrong. Like, it's a delight to be like, "Oh, something I didn't think of, like, a whole new way of thinking is now available to me." That's exciting. There's so much to explore there, as opposed to anyway, I enjoy it. I've discovered I'd enjoy it. Just like I used to be a picky eater, and now I love eating food I don't like, exactly because it's a new experience, which is more valuable than the discomfort of
Oh,
I
the
love this.
eating something you don't
I
like.
should have you talk to my kids. That's good.
Yes, mine too.
I don't know if I can help with how young are your kids, Rachel? Or old, I
7
guess.
and 3, so
7
little
and
still.
3. Yeah. They
My
just
little one
regular
is going on a school bus for the first time today, and he is just over the moon. Like, he's going on his first field trip, and he gets to go on a bus, and like we talked about school buses all weekend. So I'll report back next time I come on the school bus situation.
So at the age where you can be delighted by a school bus, you're not gonna go with the logic of, like, a new experience is more valuable than an uncomfortable experience.
This is, I mean, like, he should be like he's delighted by the newness of a school bus. Like, ideally, we
Yeah.
could be delighted by like chicken nuggets that are not shaped like dinosaurs. Like, maybe we could eat all variety of chicken nugget shapes. Like, I don't know.
That's so funny. So what have you learned about open source,
Oh gosh.
the license changes?
So I want to hear Kote's take on this, but I feel like one of the things that has come up for me a lot lately is like the people on the sidelines, which includes me. I feel are like the people shouting from the sidelines. It's like open source is not a business model. But then
Uh-huh.
I think we stop the sentence. Like, I think we don't necessarily spend enough time examining like how hard it is to make software business and
Mm.
how hard it is to make these open core businesses work. And so like I think the one that was really interesting that came out recently was the article from Buoyant. It came
Mhm.
out last week, and they're talking about how they kind of he didn't do like a rug pull on the license, but they changed the way that they were distributing their software, so they didn't have free supported versions of the software earlier this year, and they're now profitable. And
Yeah.
it really upset a lot of people for a very long time. But it's also one of those ones to say, well, how else do you want me to make money? It's like, and so I think we're grappling with that in some really interesting ways in this industry. And people are taking all kinds of takes in terms of, well, I mean, it truly is a full spectrum of people who are religiously opposed to any kind of not open source license, like the way over here is, and the people who are, and there's this whole spectrum in between. And I don't think we have good nuance to talk about how to make the business side work at different points on that spectrum.
Yeah. I guess what do I think of that? Speaking of having a going out there and having an opinion, right? Like, I mean, I think let's see. So from the bottoms up, like I think that like Whitney and I talked about this a lot recently. Like I think it's really hard, not impossible, but very difficult to do like infrastructure and programming software if you don't have open source as part of the
Yes.
way that you're doing it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
primarily it's because you're gonna not release your software for several years and like get no feedback, right? Whereas like if you're doing it in the open from the beginning, you like are getting all of that feedback while you're working on it. And
And
and then go ahead.
and it's a matter of everything integrating with everything else. If it's
Right,
out in the
exactly.
open, people will build their own integrations if it's
That's
good
that's
software.
that's a great
Yeah.
point. And like even well, you two and I know Whitney probably know this better than I would, but like I feel like in the Kubernetes world, there was this weird couple of years where service mesh meant nothing and everything. And like I think it wasn't like integrated into the open source world enough. I mean, even if it was open source, but the point being that like the various things running around didn't like latch on to officialdom enough. And then once it did, like it was fine. Things got figured out or not. But maybe that's a bad example. I don't know historically, but like, so that's the first problem. And then I don't know. The second thing is like, I think we as a community, I mean, you were kind of doing it, Rachel. Like we need to have a stronger stand on like, there's no open source business model. like just
Uh-huh.
like in the sense of like, these two things exist, but there's no virtuous cycle between them, right? Like there's no connection between the two of them that really like matters. And so therefore, like you can get upset about rug pull stuff because like you change the norms of a relationship that you had, but it's not like gravity where it's like wrong. It's just like, oh, sorry about that. I don't know. Like those are my jumbled up thoughts. But yeah, I think there used to be open source business models, but now like I like the way you put it. It's just like doing anything in software is really difficult.
Mhm.
Never
Or
mind the way you do it.
from my new to tech perspective, it seems like that the open source business models were successful to get VC funding, but were not able to turn a profit if they were based purely on open source. Is that true? Is there an exception to that? Do you know of a business that turns a profit off of a pure open source product?
Let's see. Oh, off of a pure open
Crickets.
source product? I mean, everything is like if you're in that open source world, it's going to usually be open core. So you're upselling something or you're doing a services based model, something like
Yeah.
that. Something
Yeah.
because,
Who's
yeah,
doing that
like
well?
who's doing that well? Oh, that's a really good
Uh-huh.
question. I mean, like, who is doing that well?
Is what is GitLab's deal? Do they have closed source that they sell?
GitLab has so they're doing like end to end, like entire SDLC plays, and then they have an enterprise version that's like all the fun things enterprise want, like the RBACs and audits and all those
Sure.
fun things. But I think for me, who's doing it well? Like everyone's gonna say Red Hat, that's the classic. But
Uh-huh.
I think that it's gonna get me in trouble. Like they've definitely done they have made some choices in the open source ecosystems in recent years that have made some concerns. But like if you look at IBM's financials, like Red Hat is definitely the bright star of where IBM is. So like in terms of finances, they're doing well. In terms of like the Sendos community, maybe they're doing less well in terms of how that community is feeling. So it's like it's just a balancing act in terms of how people are thinking about what is their value, what is it that you have to prioritize, and
Yeah,
I think that
I think they're a good example. I should know better how they combine their stuff together. Although now that I'm not an analyst, maybe I shouldn't.
you're
But
good.
Uh-huh.
but especially to comment on them as someone who works at like a competitor. But I think there's another distinction in open source that's always existed, but maybe is where the business side comes in now. Of like you could call it like for free, you can get a pile of stuff. And if you want to pay money, you can get something that's ready to work. Right. And
Yeah.
so like that's probably the distinction between with GitLab and Red Hat, where like you can get the stuff, but if you just want to run it, like then you need to pay for it. Or I don't know, something like that. I don't know. I think open
It's
source is
like
pretty
if
good.
you want integrated experiences, if you want all of the enterprise stuff, like I want it on prem to run really well. I want kind of SLAs. I want all of the auditability stuff, like all of those things are usually where the security things like upcharges come in all of those places. But also just like that's where managed services come in. It's like, I just don't want to deal with any of this at all. I just like want someone else to run it for me.
And does the business model of when there's just one open source technology like Solo that's built on Istio, or Buoyant on Linkerd, of course, decided that it wasn't enough. Or what's another example? Nirmata on Kyverno, or Acuity on Argo CD. When there's just one open source project under it, have you seen success with that model?
So are we talking like single vendor open source, like one vendor is backing one project and that like it's not like that? It's like I wouldn't necessarily put Linkerd in that category, because it is CNCF backed, and they kind of have they have met the CNCF standards of having like multiple vendor support for the projects. But it's definitely like, I think Hashi would be a good example there of one where it's kind of one project, community is really behind it, but like it's really centralized in terms of how the project is used, who has control, and those, and it is de facto like Terraform is Hashi's. Like in as much as it is communities, it is Hashi's. And so I think that you can have rightful skepticism. I think right now there are definitely companies that we talk to who are treating single vendor backed projects in at least a similar category as proprietary, because we've had enough rug pulls now that people are increasingly skeptical of whether or not there's actually a sustainable community behind some of these projects. So
speaking of HashiCorp, like their decision then to close source Terraform, have you seen that work for them? Like now that we're a few months past, how's it going?
So that was the financial piece that I mentioned earlier. And they were one of the companies that actually had public financials that I could look at, and so the net of that research is it's really mixed bag in terms of where people's at. Everyone's revenue continued to climb, but it usually climbed about a pace from where they were pre-license change. Like there wasn't a significant like uptick in their rate of revenue absorption. But the net income all over the place, or I mean, net income's all over. But like I was really, really shocked that like Mongo, you see, like Mongo was one of the companies and they had huge growth. You look at Hashi and they kind of have just been in a steady decline since IPO. So there really was like absolutely no correlation between companies that made this change and what we actually saw in the numbers. So I guess
the verdict is still out.
Verdict is out.
Yeah.
And I definitely had a lot of people reach out and were grumpy with me because like my sample size was really small because I had to go with publicly available financial data. Like, but when I did this, like this is what saved my company. It's like, I don't doubt that, but also I don't have that metric. It's like I can't include your data if your data is not available. And so like it's definitely an incomplete story, but it's also not it's not a clean story.
And something you said earlier too is that there are different degrees to which people can close their open source project. So we talked about the Buoyant level where they just stopped releasing supported artifacts versus the HashiCorp level where they straight up closed it. What else is there? What other gray?
Like,
what else can you do?
If you think of Redis, like first they closed their modules and then they closed the core. So like you can definitely do things like that. I think you can move to more restrictive licenses. So like not necessarily a rug pull, but so Grafana might be one of the examples there where they're still open source, but it's a more restrictive license than it was. So yeah, I would say there's definitely ways that people can do it.
Do you think the software community is getting more tolerant of companies doing this? Are they growing more understanding that companies do need to make money, or are people mad every time?
I wouldn't say tolerant, but I would say like jaded and numb. It's just like we just have like the expectation that this is going to go poorly. I don't know. What do you think, Nugget?
Yeah. Like I think that's accurate. Like it's almost normal now. Like that it happens. It's not like so shocking. Like other drama comes up in other strange, sad, bizarre ways nowadays. But I think, yeah, I think maybe in like 3 or so years, or maybe even less, like it'll not be that big of a deal. Like I'm sure there'll always be drama of like this was supposed to be like purely open source and something crazy happened. Like, like when I don't know, if some CNCF project got taken over by a vendor and completely steered some way that everyone objected to, it'd be like, oh, there's a hole in the governance, right? Like, or something like that. But that you were making me think of something else, is like, what's your sense for pricing in all of this, where there probably is some price that becomes too expensive, and then some, like, I don't know, forking or closing happens. Like there must be some equilibrium where like we can do stuff in open source if you'll pay the prices that make it sustainable. But then on the buy side, they're like, I don't want to pay your prices. And then so on the sell side, you have to be like, how can I make you pay my prices? Right. And like that's where this, I don't know what kind of game that is. But like there must be some
Catalyst.
equilibrium or something where
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the two prisoners rat each other out instead of playing along, and then it goes haywire, and it's probably based on price, I would imagine.
Imagine so. Like, there's a couple of things that calls to mind for me. One, I'm going to reference that Buoyant piece that William Morgan released recently. Again, and he tests like my company, like, Buoyant is now profitable, and I have been able to employ more Linkerd maintainers because of this. So like there is part of that where by making a different decision in and around open, he felt more financially able to support open, which I think is maybe not intuitive for a lot of people when you're thinking about open source values. So I thought that was
Yeah.
really interesting. And then the other one I thought was interesting is, I'm not remembering the name right now, but the Sentry campaign about like the CFO, like chief. Shit, I'm gonna have to look it up. But it's basically like that graphic with like the money. It's like we all need to pay the maintainers. We need to make like this open source,
Right.
and I don't believe Sentry is open source, but I think that it's one of those ones where we start to see some pushback in there needs to be, even if it is not necessarily me offering all of my products as open source products, I need to be able to give back to that ecosystem in a way that is sustainable. And I think
Yeah.
hopefully we can come up with some kind of answers there.
Yeah, that is like the the snarky word for this sort of thing is the freeloaders, right? Which
Yes,
I think was that what Red Hat invoked when they did all their CentOS stuff? I forget, or like that's when I first remember that word. And like
that
it,
was a
it
choice of words they used. Yes.
yeah. So that was like, but that is the other side of the moral boat in all of this, is like, yeah, freeloading does suck. Right? Like, so there is like there is if you take this an open source community software and just totally profit off of it without giving something back. Well, for one side, like if you're let's say you're not a vendor, you're an enterprise. I think you're free to freeload. Basically, like no one really gets upset if you take the open source stuff and don't pay back into the community, more or less. It's really only if you're trying to sell something in that area that people get upset, which is another interesting moral dimension. That like people only get upset if there's a competitor using the code. But if you're not a competitor, no problem. Like not a big deal.
So, because if you're not a competitor, you're just the total addressable market.
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
at me. Look how big my market is. Um,
Yeah.
but no,
Yeah, I think you kind of set it up well at the beginning of just like we used to have these other norms and now we don't. And like I think it's taking everyone a long time to like readjust to it. Like the 2000 ways of thinking about this are definitely not the 2020 ways of thinking about it. It's
this is
just
fair.
totally
And
different.
then, one thing I'm wondering is, so far all the examples I know about are like HashiCorp and Terraform, Redis and Valkey, or not Valkey. Redis. But
Redis and
they're all
Redis.
Redis and Redis. But they're all backed by or Buoyant and Linkerd. Like they're all backed by one company. Like, do you think it's possible to do these license changes when there's an open source project that's being maintained across a lot of companies?
Maybe it's feasible, but it would be really hard because the governance structure in theory would be there to prevent it. So like maybe, but I haven't seen that. I mean,
Okay.
I guess like MySQL maybe would be like the example I could think of. But
I do think Buoyant's solution of no longer open sourcing stable releases, but keeping all of the code still open source. I think that's an elegant solution. That's my opinion. What do you think?
I don't have a problem with it. And for me, it's they have I think one of the things that we watched in kind of the CNCF land was what does it mean to have a graduated project whose primary backer is doing something different. And so like watching the CNCF kind of coalesce around the project, I think was also
Uh-huh.
really interesting to watch. Watching Linkerd kind of with their recent announcement coming out and like how they're thinking about maintainership. Like I think it's been a successful and interesting thing to watch the like both the foundations that are in place to try to help and also the company behind it and the project overall. Like it feels like everybody coalesced in some interesting and healthy ways.
What did you learn from the CNCF through the process about the CNCF?
I think it was just interesting to see other maintainers come into the fold to audibly tell customers like we support this project. This is not going to be an abandoned project. This is still going to be available as a community and supported as a community project. And we saw that come together in a way that I think provided reassurance in a time where it some like any kind of change to open source could feel destabilizing.
Oh, is your job of an analyst, do you just read news articles all day long?
I
How do
read
you
a
keep
lot.
it in your brain?
It's like, still
What's your
track.
strategy? Yeah, what's your input strategy?
I read a lot and I take notes while I read and and it's like not an elegant note solution. I use
Yeah.
like simple note and it's like text only and I just like all of my stuff just goes into one spot and I search it. And like eventually I'm like I should put all of my notes into like an LLM and like have like my own version of like Rachel ChatGPT, but I
Mm.
don't do that. It's just it's me into like simple text search.
So I'm relatively new to tech and AI has been such a disrupting force. Like everyone was chugging along talking about infrastructure and platform engineering stuff I loved and still do love. And then all of a sudden everything's about AI and I don't like it one bit. But I can feel but that's not the point. The point is I'm sure that disrupting technologies have happened before and will happen again. And so I guess I'm interested in when has it happened before? Because I wasn't around for it. What does it feel like, and will this be over soon?
So like my personal opinion, like I don't think this is Web3. Like I don't think it's going to be like hot for 18 months and then just die. I do think that there are legs on AI, primarily just because once you personally have that experience of this is increased productivity for me personally. Like even if it's
Yeah.
questionable whether or not it has increased team productivity, which I think is very much instant. Or like if you look at like how are we going to maintain all of this code? Like I think there's still really big SDLC questions in and around AI. But I think that as an individual user, like it's really kind of magical. Like I don't write my own Python scripts anymore, and it's delightful. I love it. Like
Uh-huh.
I love not like writing my own API queries. It's delightful. But I I'm just me, and I'm like I'm not pushing my scripts to production. Like I don't have to do anything to maintain it. But like I would be so sad if AI went away, just
Mm.
because it makes my life easier. And usually things that can make a broad swath of the population's lives easier, like it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle.
So
So
what do
it's
you use it for? Go over. I don't know. What are a few things that whether it's obvious or interesting? What are some things you do?
Yeah, so like I I code. I'm gonna put that in like really, really strong air quotes. In that I use R to make all of my charts when I'm publishing things.
Right.
And I I can do it, but like there are things where I'll get in there and be like, oh, like how the fuck do I like label the legend alphabetically instead of in the order it is? Like all those just like those little things that. And before I just had like a giant like Google Doc file where I would put like my own code snippets so I could like search things.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right.
I'm like, now I don't have to do that. Now I just like go in and I ask, it's like, hey, like, here's my code. I want it to do this. Tell me what I changed. And it's amazingly good at that. Like it's so convenient at just those little tweaks. But again, want to stress, like this is not production code. This is a script to make a chart.
Right,
And
right.
so, like if I fuck it up or ChatGPT fucks it up, like it doesn't have any like outage impacts. Like so, like I have the luxury of getting to use it in a really confined and safe space, which is good.
Well, how about outside of coding? Do you use it for other things?
Sometimes like I feel slightly guilty about this. Sometimes I pipe in press releases and then have it summarize them for me,
Oh,
so I
yeah,
don't have
yeah.
to read the press release. So
well,
I like
they
that.
probably wrote it with AI, so you're good.
um, I'll do. I like the summarization feature. I use the summarization feature a lot in terms of just like give me a summary here,
Yeah,
and
that
then
that is
and then
that
I
is good.
decide whether or not I want to dive all the way in on.
I could thinking about a lot of. I mean, I read. Well, I don't know if I read the same amount, but I still read a lot of stuff, and I think I don't know the exact right prompt, but I, I would like a prompt that's like, is there anything in this? Like, which definitely when you read a lot of press releases, like you're just kind of like, yes, we're going to accelerate the adoption of macroeconomic headwinds. Like, and just like, it's, sometimes it's good to use for just like, tell me the 3 sentences in here that actually say anything,
Yes.
which I think is
I
great.
have a gist that I have of just like trying out different prompts to see which ones
Yeah.
give me the best summaries. It's, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I'm still working on that magic.
So is there any like Red Monk team thing you use AI for? Like have y'all cracked like how to
We
apply it
have
at a team
not.
level?
From a team level, so like we are really, really careful that none of our clients stuff. So like I can put a press release in,
Of course.
but like I like any kind of client like slide deck or something, like none of our client NDA stuff touches anything related to AI
Yeah.
because we don't want to fuck up somebody's NDA.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So I think we've all played with local models a little, but like in terms of like cross team anything, like we haven't done anything because we just really like the entire analyst model is built on trust, and we don't necessarily want
Right,
to
right.
hand that trust over to a third party software.
And O'Grady would probably be like, well, why pay for it? Like, I think that would also be a the CFO is into affordable tool.
He is chief build it himself AI model of
Yeah,
that's for sure.
yeah. I mean, you bring up like I think there's a wall at least that I've reached with it in my professional life, which is like, well, I can't use it for this, so the
Mhm.
utility doesn't this theoretic utility doesn't exist. Like, I'm pretty sure if I could use it at work, it would be great, but I can't.
Like
So
if
like
we
it
could
limits what I
dump
can do.
all of our collective notes into one
Yeah, yeah,
spot,
yeah,
like that would be amazing. Like and
yeah,
query, like that would it would be so delightful. I can see all of the things that I would love, but
yeah.
we're proceeding very cautiously with anything related to client stuff.
Yeah, we just need, maybe next year we can just all go buck wild and see what happens. We'll see what comes out of it. Well, so
Okay, you first.
yeah, exactly. I'll be watching the other buck wild people while I'm over here secure in my policy. So the new DORA report came out recently,
Oh
and
my gosh, I have so many thoughts on this.
oh well, great. I was only going to ask one question, but maybe you can help me understand the 130 pages. I think it's only 115.
I haven't
Uh,
read the whole report yet, but I got briefed on it beforehand, and I felt like there was a lot of really counterintuitive findings in there.
Oh yeah. Well, so
Bring
one of
it.
them,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's counterintuitive, but what with your as you and I used to joke, your numbers background, like I wanted some sense of like the platform engineering improvements findings that they had, and
Mhm.
like maybe I'm going to mess it up, but it was basically something like if you do platform engineering, you're going to get like 6% better, right? And there's some nuance to it, and it's actually 6% better. And at the individual level, you can get like 8% better versus 10% better, and there's slowing. There's a bunch of stuff, but the broader point is like in reading that, my first reaction was like, well, based on the marketing material that I've participated in over the past 10 years, this is terrible. But on the other hand, I was thinking like, you know, if I got 8% returns annually compounding on my investments, I would be retired by now. I mean, not maybe, but so like when you read like when I read that some initiative that you've done gives you 8% productivity improvements, is that good or bad? Like what how do I think about that?
I think this is a fair question. I think most companies just make up whatever interest rate they're comparing. Just like
Like what their
I, w- I would say, I
IRR
will
is?
say, I would say that most like comparison IRRs are like finger in the wind. Like 5 sounds
Yeah.
good. Like I do not believe that most teams are like maybe at one point somebody did the analysis and then that just gets like propagated through all the spreadsheets for all time and it never
I'm
is
sure.
like
Yeah.
5% is the company benchmark.
Yeah, they're
um,
probably like, if we wanted to change that, we'd go talk to they would have to talk to that asshole who's the SVP and like, I got other shit to do with my life. Like, let's just go with it.
so, but it just makes me think back. I was talking to someone who I worked with a long, long time ago, and there was this huge analysis. I spent like 6 months of this analysis trying to figure out how to allocate costs across this whole swath of company infrastructure.
Mm.
And it was really involved, really multifaceted. And I have found that that number is still just in use like 15 years later. It's just,
Oh
this is the
wow.
cost of what it is. I said, oh, that is not how that analysis was supposed to be used.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so definitely like if you're looking at the internal rate of return, right? Which is
Yes.
like the make my definition correct here if I get it wrong, but
Okay.
it's the sort of like if we have a pile of cash, if we do nothing else with it, here's the return we're going to get on the pile of cash, right? As a
Yes.
company. And so therefore, whenever you propose spending this pile of cash, you need to exceed the IRR. Probably once you load in all the risk and it might work or not work, I don't know, by
Mhm.
5%. I mean, depending on the industry, I'm sure in groceries, it's just like if you can get 0.25% better, do it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But like whatever. But like, um, so you've got to kind of like do better than nothing,
Yes.
I
I
guess.
think that's a great
Uh,
way to put it. Like, I think that's a very understandable definition. So
and
I think no notes.
and so going back to the thing is like, so if we're gonna go through uh, I think introducing platform engineering as we understand it now is pretty risky based on the anecdotes. How do you say it? Anecdata that I have, and like it's difficult.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, is 8% more productive teams is that good? Like, what would you hope for?
I think this is one of the things that I have. Like, so when you talked about individual versus team productivity, and this is kind of more in the AI space, but something I've been thinking about a lot
Mm.
is we keep seeing these metrics come across about we improve. This is like the one that GitHub was throwing out all the time when they introduced Copilot. It's like 55% improvement in product, but like what is so like one that's based off of a study, not real life. Two, we're talking about individuals, not teams. So it's like you get to code through all these different things faster. Three, like how are we maintaining this long term? And then four, like is a 55% that's like can't do we have the workflows enabled that like if somebody has all of a sudden moving through their priorities 55% faster that we're actually getting 55% value because like what are they
Oh yeah,
working on next?
that's a really
It's
good
like
point.
Uh-huh.
so like thinking about
Or
all those different things and then like if you go back to the DORA report where like it's really questionable whether or not these AI tools are creating this level of like so they were saying that there's differences in stability and throughput in ways that have not happened before. And there are like whether AI tools are contributing to that seems unclear, but it seems like there's possibly a correlation there. And so I think that there is an
Yeah.
interesting thing to be kind of figuring out there in terms of how all of that comes together. But in terms of platform engineering, if we want to think about the the growth rate, so this kind of, I'm sorry, I am all over the place. There's a Charity Majors quote that I loved from earlier this summer when she was on Oxide and Friends with Brian Cantrell and Adam, and she said infrastructure is everything below what you care about. And so I want to put all of my like innovation investments in the part that like differentiates me. Everything below that, that's my infrastructure. And so what is infrastructure is going to really vary from team to team and person or like company to company. Like what is actually considered infrastructure and where are you differentiating is going to matter based off of what it is that you're working on. But like in theory, like making those infrastructure investments like a platform so that people can do better, like it's so appealing because like, oh yes, let's get that standardized. Let's make it so that everybody can do their work and we can innovate up here. And
Yeah.
like yeah, you've lived to the James Water value line, like you know this.
That's right.
But I think that for me, it's it gets really scary for the people who are in charge when all of a sudden you say that those investments, like these are supposed to be the stability investments, and then up here's where we're innovating, and like usually innovation and risk are the things that are like go together. And so like when you start to say like like the down here investments are also the ones that are really risky too, and then everybody is like it's a whole house of cards that tumbles really fast, and everybody gets all anxious. And so we all just like to pretend that the infrastructure is stable and we're
Yeah.
going to
Well,
read that 8% return and it's all going to be fine.
on that topic, I was just talking with someone this morning at some big place, and we were trying to figure out how you put metrics around infrastructure that are associated with the business's success and performance, right? And one, kind of as you were saying, I think you were going over an example of like you got to come up with a model. If you have centralized infrastructure, you have to come up with a model to attribute the success of 5,000 applications to it. You know, whatever. Like that would be a pretty phenomenal platform if you had 5,000 applications running on it. But, you know, the more applications you have running on centralized infrastructure, well, I mean, I think the more difficult it becomes to attribute business success to the platform. It's kind of like in aggregate, you can be like, the company hasn't burned down, so we're doing something right with the computers. But like in any individual like dollar or euro, whatever you're spending, it's hard to say that's helped, like, you know, however you're doing that. And
I've oh, sorry.
no,
I
go ahead.
recently heard this idea of treating a platform as a startup within a company, which has been very appealing to me because it's
Mm,
like find one proof of concept, one team you can help, one capability you can make, build it, prove the value, use that to get more money, build and iterate and improve. And so you can see those improvements. You have kind of a baseline to measure from, and you're not doing anything without like it doesn't have a ton of risk associated with it. Like
yeah.
you're increasing the risk as you're increasing proof of success. So I like that mental model around platform engineering and as a way to introduce platform engineering.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And maybe if you deliver that way from the start, it gets easy to track the success because I'm sure, well, I'm not sure. I would hope like the big public cloud providers don't have this issue. They
Mhm.
probably know like this chunk of our centralized infrastructure makes this amount of money, right? Like so
Mhm.
maybe it's just because you have lack of tooling around it or whatever. My brain is trailing off on that exciting rabbit hole. But the other thing that this person and I were saying is, but you also have to be defensive that if you did your job perfectly and the business was stupid, you don't want to get punished, right? Like it's almost like you have to show that you provided flawless failure, right? And so like it even compounds the problem that like if you do the infrastructure job well and the business just like bones it up, then like you still want to get promoted for having done a good job, right? Instead of punished.
That's
Yeah.
like a humanity thing, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that's interesting about infrastructure and developer productivity and how they relate. So we talked about it in the context of platform engineering, but then also I think we can discuss it in the context of AI. Like Rachel was saying, AI can make 55% faster developers.
Well, I would like that to not be attributed to me.
You're right. Fair, fair, fair. That she read somewhere or somebody said, yes. Touche. But the point is, like, okay, we have that speed, but then at what infrastructure cost? Like a pure
Mm.
dollar amount cost? Or in terms of like the cost of having to run super huge workloads, the fact that it might break things, we have to reinvent our processes around infrastructure now that we're dealing with AI sized workloads. I think it's a similar problem
Yeah.
in another space.
I think you're absolutely correct. That makes a lot of sense to me. The other thing, this is when you're tying back to like the momentum of AI. I had a conversation with someone whose top-down mandate on tooling is 10% of their budget goes towards AI related products because there's just so much FUD in and around this space in terms of like, if we are not on top of this, we will lose out forever. And so and then you also have the fear on the other side where it's like we don't want to leak all of our data accidentally. It's just like there's the fear if we do and there's the fear if we don't, and everyone is trying to figure out how all these come together. But like I really do believe, Whitney, that like what you're saying, like if you are making infrastructure investments that enable, yes, those AI workloads, but also all of the other workloads, like that is a bonus for all of the things. And I wish that more people maybe were approaching it that way rather than just like hair on fire. We've got to throw money at AI.
And I think with infrastructure, it's hard too because it doesn't relate directly to the value stream. It's indirect, and so it makes it a bit of a harder sell too.
Yeah.
Yes, that's been my marketing quagmire for a decade. Coming up with various ways of doing that. So you brought up an example like you need to spend 10% of your budget on this AI stuff, and to elaborate on the joke, it's like you would ask, what do you want me to spend it on, and they would be like, gotta go to lunch, right? Like I don't know, but it better, whatever you pick better be awesome. And like so that brings up like the whole, this is especially big in the developer world, is like the whole idea of like, this is very James Governor take on things, like software development is fashion, right? Like it's just like things that you go through here and there. I think my former coworker Bridget, she used to like the phrase resume driven development, all that kind of stuff. And like what's the state of fashion driving selection nowadays, you think? You think it's bigger, smaller? Like, is it a thing? How does it play out?
This is fair. So one of the things, so if we're going to go back to like the term resume driven development, like in my career in enterprise, the things that made me more valuable as a colleague most of the time were like those internal knowing where the bodies were buried kind of things. Like we made this decision for this reason because it pissed this person off, and therefore these are all of the things that I'm doing. It's like, so it's like, yes, knowing the data, like yes, knowing the architecture, how to use the tools, like all of those things. But it's like it was understanding that internal landscape about why things had happened over a period of time. So it's like the more deeply I knew the company itself, the more useful I was to the company. Whereas like when I'm wanting a job, like none of that is like, I mean, like it, in broad, like social skills, it's applicable, but like from wanting to get a new job, it's like, I know this tool, I know this technology, I can pick this up this quickly. And one of the things that I think could be interesting if we can ever get it right, it's like, can we get an AI system in place where like some of that social knowledge is shared internally in a way where like we don't have gatekeepers, we don't have somebody who's like hoarding something just because like that is their job security. Like we can document how and why things work. Like this is totally me being naive, probably to the point of Pollyannish, but like, can we make it to the point where like some of that hoarding of internal knowledge becomes more shared and distributed in like something besides just a SharePoint? And we can start to like, can we let people focus on some of those things, and like maybe we can make better tech decisions as an industry because we like, instead of like having to chase the resume driven development, like maybe people like get a chance to look at the tools. Like that was totally Pollyanna. But I do think that there's a way where it's like not an either or.
Mm.
Isn't there like people say their Zoom meetings are being recorded or somehow the company has access to transcripts of all the Zoom meetings? Like maybe that's where AI comes in and preserves a history of how decisions are made. If it's even true. That might be an urban legend.
Ooh, that's a
You
great
could
rumor
do
to
it. Like,
start. Make everyone paranoid.
I think there's gonna be. I feel like we're entering like a log era where it's like there's gonna be a whole lot of unstructured data, and there's gonna be a really hard signal to noise problems. Like in theory,
Yeah.
Mm.
we can start to solve some of those things, but right now
Do
we're just making more noise.
do you think AI is gonna fundamentally change humanity? Do you think your children's adult lives are gonna be drastically different than ours because of AI? Or do you think it's more like a trend?
I'm gonna lie, the week before the election, I'm just hoping my children have adult lives. We don't burn this all down. I'm sorry, we can cut that part out. I do
I
I do think it will matter. Like, I think just watching people try to figure out how to adapt to AI in education spaces, it seems unlikely that they will be untouched by AI. Like, whether or not it fundamentally changes things, like, I kind of hope not. But I do think it will be part of at least the landscape that they have to navigate.
Uh-huh. Sometimes I wonder if all the easy tasks are automated away by AI, how's anyone ever gonna become an expert?
I think this is a really fair question. And I had this conversation with I was a customer at an Adobe breakfast forever ago. And it was when they introduced like content generated autofill or something. It's like that used to be a junior designer's job is to like go in and like trace all of those little things, like make what I don't know anything about art clearly. And so, but anyways, it used to be a junior designer's job, and now you can do it with this feature that Adobe has introduced. Like, what is the career path to get into this field? And I think that we're just going to continue having that conversation over and over again. And we started having this conversation well before it was called AI, but I think it's going to be accelerated and more heightened now.
Yeah, to invoke the old Jurassic Park thing, right? Like, there's not a lot of people asking if we want this thing to speed things up. It's kind of an example of like, I don't know. The ridiculous example I always think is like when you look up how many different types of screwdrivers there are, like at least my conclusion is just like capitalism needs to calm down, right? Like I don't think
Uh-huh.
we need this many types of screwdrivers. We probably could have five, but I'm sure someone was like, here's a way to make money with a screwdriver. And I don't know, maybe that's the engineering
I
screwdriver
don't know.
problem.
I feel like if you're gonna go to war with all the screwdrivers, but you have to also go to war with all the people making all those different screws, and then it's just gonna spiral out of control.
Exactly. It's a classic screwdriver conundrum. Which came first? Well, as there, I still have some analyst world questions. Having worked in the analyst world for a while, I haven't actually worked inside it. I talk with people like yourselves and the Gartners and Forrester people every now and then. But I think you've been doing this like 10 years now. Is that right?
Getting close. I'm at 8.
Yeah. That might as well be 10, depending
Rounds
on how
up
you
a little bit.
round. Yeah. And I think so that let's say I don't like to do math in public, but that's 2016, 2018 or something, right?
2016.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like as an analyst, I think you've lived through the like dominance of video as a format on the web. Like that seems to be the premiere. That seems to be the top medium for
Mhm.
content on the web now. I don't know if that's true, but that's my anecdata, to use that dumb phrase that I love so much again. And so like what how does that affect the way that not only you and Red Monk work, but when you look at the other analysts, what good and bad are they doing about video as that medium shift?
Yeah. I think for me, it's two ways to do both as a producer of content and a consumer of content.
Oh, that's
As
a
a
good framing. Yeah.
as a consumer of content, I will take written every single day. Um, because you can skim it, like I can consume it faster than I can video.
Yeah.
I
Same.
do love, like, I think podcasts and videos are great for kind of videos are great if I can listen. So it's like the around the house, like I'm washing dishes and I can listen to a podcast, or I'm going for a walk and I can like catch up on a conference talk that I wanted. It's like those are good. It's like if I'm having to like sit in front of YouTube and like watch a tutorial, like I have to be in a really specific place with a really specific need for that to be the correct medium for me.
Yeah.
Um, but as a producer, it's like we focus a lot on written work, but like we've also tried to branch out into these other mediums. So it's like we're doing more video interviews, we're doing more podcasts, and it's just really this hope of reaching people where they are and trying to figure out what sticks. But like if I were to say what, at least for me, gets the most responses from people, it's the written stuff.
Yeah. I feel like quantity wise, y'all have done more videos than written stuff over the past couple of years. And to be fair, it's videos are smaller, easier, right? So like
They're smaller,
writing.
they're easier, and I think also there was in pandemic land a very variable chunk of money that had previously gone to in-person events that suddenly needed a home. So videos were one of those things. And so like
Yeah.
part of it is that hangover from just where the money was in 2021 to 2022.
To bring this full circle, I'm confused again about what an analyst is if you're making
Okay,
content.
I'm so glad we clarified all these things.
Well,
But
I
the more I
thought
talk, the
someone
less
was
you understand what it is. Yeah, analysts.
I thought you were like you said you were paid to you listen to anybody, but you are paid to talk. But now if you're trying to make content, then you're trying to get people to listen to you talk. So I'm
This
confused.
is fair. Sometimes I talk for free and sometimes I don't.
And what do you hope
Turns
to
out it's
get?
not a perfect metaphor. No, like for things like this, like delighted to come chat with you all. Like a lot of podcasts I will guest on, and that's not a thing. But like sometimes clients will be like, we want to do a webinar and we want like an analyst to come give a landscape view of how they see the ecosystem, and then we're going to talk as a company about how we fit into that ecosystem. In those situations, like we would be doing the content, but it would be a paid content. Yeah.
Okay. So when you're making Redbook content, you're doing so public content, you're still doing that in service to your clients.
Sometimes it's a mixed bag.
Okay.
Some as a client wants to have they want to put some of their company forward or one of their products forward, and we'll do that. And sometimes it's like someone in the community that we're really excited to talk to, and we just invite them on. So it's a mix.
That's cool. And
Yeah.
it's about, I'm sure, public perception too.
Yeah.
So when you're, just as far as the Rachel's tools and tech tips here,
Okay.
like so when you're consuming this video content, like how do you do it so that you have the same, I don't know the words, learning effect that you would from text content, right? Because like and I'll tell you a little bit about like how I think about it. Why I'm asking this question is like I do like probably all of us here do. Like I'll save up a YouTube video to
Mhm.
listen to while I go on a walk,
Mhm.
and is it a good excuse to take a long walk? But I'm not sure if it's as good as if I sat down at my desk and like took notes while I was
Mhm.
watching it, let alone as good as if like this was a write-up that I read and I can go and highlight things. But
Right.
I don't feel like I have a choice now. Like I need to be able to consume videos as
Mhm.
content. So like how are you making that work as well?
It's both ways. Like so we were talking before I started about Whitney and her flashcards, which is amazing. Like the way that I maintain things is like I am like I take stenographer level notes. Like I
Mm.
take really extensive notes, which I don't always like. Obviously, you don't do when you're on a walk or something like that. But like the other thing is the being in a different place can trigger a different thing. Like I still remember exactly where
Mm.
I was on a walking path when James Waters said something that like inspired a blog post. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really smart thing. It's just like
That's interesting.
there's something about being in different places and experiencing like experiential learning, which is different than note taking learning. So
Right, right.
it just matters I think it's what the content is, what you're trying to get out of it, and you just kind of have to roll the dice. And there are definitely times when I like have to like take my phone out and like type things
Okay.
down
Yeah.
while I'm walking because like I really like that quote. But
That's a good reminder to like I mean, there's two sides of a medium. I'm not up on my McLuhan or whatever, but like, the medium will force the way you talk about something, but then it also forces the way you consume something. And kind of like what you're saying, what you should do is think about what advantage do I have while I'm walking to consume media, and how does that change the way I'm doing it? And I would imagine, I don't know, you got more blood going to your brain. I don't even know what it is, but like you're right, there is something, at least in my own experience, I think there's a higher rate of epiphanies while I'm moving around than while I'm sitting at my desk.
yes, and
and
I mean, like rough rule of thumb is panels and like fireside chat esque things are, I think, for me, better suited for walking.
Okay.
well, and then there's different stuff you're hoping to get from it. Like I'm reading this
Yeah.
article and I need to do my own write up. I need notes because it needs to have a final format. Or I'm just exposing myself to material and it doesn't really matter if it sticks very much or not.
Yes.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
All right. So the other analyst thing I had is uh there's more of them out there, but there's been a lot of like consolidation and new analyst firms. Like I think, and I'm not looking, unless you want to, I'm not looking for you to talk smack about anything, but just reflect on, be an industry analyst of the industry analyst business. And
Mhm.
like, there's like the Futurum group out there that seems to
Yeah.
have like, they gobbled up a few, like that CTO advisor guy, and I think it's like, it's like the Patrick Moore just renamed his firm, I think, to
Mhm.
Futurum. I don't know the funding of it, but like there's a bunch of consolidation, and they seem to have like gone batshit for video in a good way.
Mhm.
Like they do video
Yeah.
all the time. That's kind of
Yeah.
who I was thinking of when I was thinking of like, how do you consume video? Uh, but like what else? I don't know. Is there some consolidation stuff going on, or some different analyst startups, or is it just that one group? Like, is there interesting business models happening?
I would say definitely a lot of the consolidation I see is in and around the Futurum group. So I don't know all of the business models behind it, but definitely like from inside the industry, that is also what I'm seeing.
Okay, yeah, because it seems like, well, not, but I did M&A for a tiny bit, and the analyst business, having been in it, is a terrible business. If like if you want to do a roll up, right? Like the margins are small, like brand can be a thing, but the biggest problem is like uh like you can imagine if Red Monk got acquired, like whenever the lockup period was, a lot of people would leave because they would just be like, finally, right? Like I've got a big chunk of money, and now I don't have to do this, right? And then the way that you would, if you buy an analyst, if you buy any company, you're looking to get. Speaking of IRR, I don't know what the standard rate is, but probably at least you want a 20% return. Otherwise, why did you take on all this risk? And like, I don't know how you would like spend a lot of money on an analyst firm and then grow it 20%, like with all these other risks of people just leaving. So it seems like, you know, uh, it seems like a difficult thing to like do a roll up of analysts versus not. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it would definitely. I mean, in theory, you could be acquiring clientele, things like that. But like in a big sense, it would be an acqui-hire, and there's a lot of risk to acqui-hire.
Right. In which case, why not just hire the person? Right? Like, I mean, I guess maybe there's some sort of like rolling thing to it where like if you pay, I mean, how much multiple could you pay in an analyst firm? Like 3 or 4x? Like it just seems like you don't have enough revenue to play with. Maybe I haven't thought about it enough, but um anyhow.
Or it's possible you've thought
I
about it entirely too much.
the more
Sounds
likely
like okay.
scenario.
I guess maybe to round it off, right? Like, I mean, the ultimate like lone wolf analyst now is like Ben Thompson, right? And like if you do the calculations, he's got to be clearing like some kind of low seven figures, and he's got expenses as far as like I think he actually has a staff of maybe like 4 people or so, and this, that, and the other, blah blah blah, right? And actually now he's got more since he has all these podcasts, so who knows what his payouts are? And I think he flies business class everywhere, so you got that going on too. But doing plenty fine, right? But you can imagine that if you bought like the Ben Thompson empire, unless you gave him a lot of money, he wouldn't stick around for a while. And the next thing you know, he would start like stratechery, where he finally spelled it correctly, right? Like he would just go off and start his own thing. So it's like, I don't know. I know I'm beating the dead horse here, but it seems like that's a tough thing to do M&A in.
Yeah, like if you wanted to buy Stratechery, like what you would want is Ben Thompson, and like I don't know if he wants to be
Yeah, he's
purchased.
obviously not interested in that.
Yeah,
He won't
he's
even
doing
write a
just
book,
fine.
for Christ's sake.
I have a question that I think will help me understand
Okay.
the your job in specific, but like also analysts in general. And that is how would the software industry be different if analysts didn't exist?
This is a good question. I think in some senses it might not be different at all, but like for us, for what we kind of talk about how it is this outside-in view of how companies are speaking to the market. So it's like you tell us what it is that you are working on, how you're presenting to things, how you're trying to reach different audiences, and then we help you fine-tune that messaging. So it's like the thing that a CTO wants to hear is not the same thing a developer wants to hear. So how do you take the same set of information and present it in a way that is compelling to both audiences? Like who needs what information first? What level of detail do you need? Who needs to, like, kind of where am I diving in versus where am I zooming out? So a lot of it is just kind of helping remove that friction in terms of, because it's hard to see that when you're in the product day in, day out. And I think the other thing that we do a lot of times, at least for some of the bigger clients, is some of that internal politics. So it's like one group thinks this and one group thinks this, and let's bring in a third party and let's like, what do you all think? And we can kind of help. It's not necessarily that we lay fingers on the scale, but we can present what it is that we view of the landscape, and they can do with it what they will. So some of it is good.
Interesting. I hadn't considered that use case. Yeah.
And then there's also some where people will come and like help us see around the corner. So like, especially in and around like license changes and stuff, we'll have like, we might not agree with what our client does in terms of a license change, but they'll come talk to us first and we'll help them kind of, we'll say what it is we think, and then they will make their decision. And it's like, okay, given that that's your decision, here's what you should be prepared for. Things like that.
Are there 1,000 like liability forms you have people sign before you say what you think?
Our NDA and contracting process is prolonged very often.
Seems like a dangerous business.
Yeah, I think it helps that one of the founders is married to a lawyer, so
This does help a lot.
You've got literal in-house counsel if you need it at any point to help out with that. Well, this has been great. I think this is the we'll call it third time you've been on Software Defined Interviews. The first time I think was 6 minutes, but we'll round up to a full thing. But it's always nice talking to you. And you know, to add on to a little bit of what you're saying, as and Whitney was asking as an endorsement, I think a lot of what industry analysts do isn't really seen and therefore not appreciated very much. And
yeah,
I would say, to use the old fun phrase, what's valuable about an individual in a company who's been there for a while is they know where all the dead bodies are, or they know the history of decisions and why they were made. And then also they know the APIs of individuals and groups. And, you can't use green on your slides with that person. They're going to freak out. Like, so you've got that. And I think at an industry level, that's a lot of what industry analysts bring to bear. Like, it doesn't really get published, but it's valuable to talk with them because they have this industry memory, if you will. And in particular, I think, unless this has changed, like Redmuck is very good with on the vendor side with a lot of that as well. Just knowing like these things have been tried, and like the research you've been over, like here's the way open source stuff works if you're doing that. And I think now that I've worked with vendor side people a long time, I don't know a charitable way to put it, but they don't always have a lot of time to be experts. Right. And so like, it's good to have, instead they get budget to hire people who are experts.
It's kind of like what we were saying before about resume driven development. What is valuable to most companies is that internal company focus. And so having someone who can come in and inject that outside company view, and whose job it is to kind of consume and read all this. Like, most people don't get paid to read all day.
Yeah.
And so like, can somebody synthesize data for me and bring this outside view?
Yeah. And putting all that into action operationalizing it, if you'll pardon the phrase, that's like the difficult part of things, right? So like, you can pay anyone to tell you stuff, but
Yes.
like figuring out how to make it work in your organization is difficult. I think, what do they call that in economics? Your separation of concerns. What's
Oh, yes.
I forget what it is. The Portuguese make the wine and the British buy it. I think is how it works. Is that Cardinal Richelieu or something? Anyhow, thanks for being on. If people wanted to like look you up, follow your stuff, which they should, your blog, where would they go?
Just come on over to redmonk.com, redmonk.com.
Yes, and you can see there's 5 of you now. Is that
There's
5
5 of us
analysts, I
now.
should say?
Yes, 5 analysts now, and we would be happy to chat with any of you on like the world's fractured social media landscape. So rather than trying to list all of those, just come find us at redmonk.com and branch out from there.
Oh, that's a whole other topic I forgot wanted to ask about, but we're wrapping up. So we'll do that. Well, you've listened to another fantastic, I think, episode of Software Defined Interviews. This has been episode 86. See, I didn't have to ask you this
I
time,
was
Whitney.
ready.
So if you want to get the things that we talked about and a link to Rachel and Redmonk, you can go to softwaredefinedinterview.com. Wait, sorry, Software Defined Interviews. There's more than one. Now I should go register that domain name. softwaredefinedinterviews.com/86 and find that. And if you've listened this far, you should, of course, subscribe. And I don't know, do whatever that social media bullshit you do is to help us out. You know what you should be doing. We'll see everyone next time. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.